If you pick up on the science side, you go back to Isaac Newton, and he gave us a picture of the universe that was very much what's called a clockwork picture. The universe running on fixed laws that were, according to Newton, originally set in place by God. But it was a universe that essentially now ran on its own. And you can see that in the 18th century particularly favored what's called deism. That is, there is a God, but he's hands off. He started it running, and now it runs, and it runs very well. And you can see with that in the collective psyche, particularly in the academy, it very rapidly led to questions of, is God really necessary? Now you add that to what was happening on the continent with the Enlightenment and the corrupt church professing Christianity, utterly corrupt, and the reaction against that, which was fuel to the fire, really, of a rising secularism and atheism. And then you add to that what was happening in the days around the time of Charles Darwin, where you had Huxley, who was an atheist, and he resented these clergymen who were actually, some of them, very good natural philosophers, like Wilberforce actually was a much brighter man than many people think, as Darwin pointed out. But Huxley in the UK, he wanted a church scientific. He wanted to turn the churches into temples to the goddess Sophia of wisdom, that kind of idea. So you've got all of that, and then you add to that the vitriolic anti-God sentiments that are not just atheism, but anti-God feeling, led for quite a long time by Richard Dawkins and other people. And that's had huge influence on young people. It's one of the reasons I entered the fray, actually, because the media then come into this. It's even more complicated, because within the media, the dominant view, and I think the BBC actually stated this at one time, that they favored naturalism, the philosophy that nature is all there is, and there's no outside, there's no transcendence, there's no God. So you've got all of that, and against it, you have a group of people who are often cowed into letting their faith in God become private. This is the tragedy of secularism. And you get into that, the cancel culture, the woke culture, all this kind of stuff, where I've got to affirm everything. Everything's equally valid. And you've got relativism and postmodernism, at least in things that people think don't matter. You'll never meet a postmodern business person who goes to a bank manager and says, I've got $5,000 in the bank. And the bank manager says, well, actually, you owe the bank 10,000. Oh, that's only your truth. No, that doesn't work in the business world. But still, you've got this pressure of relativism. And so you end up, as Michael Burke put it a few years ago, talking about faith in God in Britain, with the first generation that doesn't have a shared worldview. Now, there's still a Christian influence, as even atheists recognize, but we've gone a long way in rejecting God and abandoning God. And then there's the entertainment industry that will fill everybody's vacuum with noise, and we entertain ourselves to death. So your question is extremely complex, and it would need a more observant person than me to give you a full answer. It's a huge mix of stuff, and any individual person may be affected this in completely different ways.
The reason that it's important, I think, to set that up is we now come to what I really wanted to hear your views on, artificial intelligence, because science is giving us extraordinary capabilities.
Yes.
But will we simply be seduced by it in the sense that artificial intelligence is rapidly creating things that are marvelous, that we want to enjoy, that may satiate us, may dull us, while aspects of the emergence of AI could be very dangerous. But before we start to explore that, for ordinary people in the street like me who are not living with this, well, I am living with this stuff, but don't know where it might go, we need to define some terms. What is AI? I think you call it narrow AI, of the sort that we're quite familiar with, limited intelligence but highly focused on narrow areas. What is artificial general intelligence, and where might that go? There's a whole number of issues. Then there's the whole issue of transhumanism. So can we start with, very broadly, AI is what, John? How would you explain it to a layman? We've all heard the term.
Oh, sure.
But
well, the first thing to realize is that the word artificial in the phrase artificial intelligence is real. And that's not due to me. It's due to one of the pioneers of the subject who happens to be a Christian. And the point is that, and we'll take a narrow AI system first because it's much easier to explain. A narrow AI system is a system involving a high-powered computer, a huge database, and an algorithm that does some picking and choosing that your local hospital will. And that's hugely important and hugely valuable. But the point is, the machine is not intelligent. It's only doing what it's programmed to do. The database is not intelligence. The intelligence is the intelligence of the people that designed the computer, know about X-rays and know about medicine. But the output is what you would expect from an intelligent doctor. So it's in that sense artificial. It's a system narrow in the sense it only deals with one thing. And all kinds, endless kinds of systems are being rolled out around the world. And some of them, as you mentioned, are extremely beneficial. Narrow AI has been used in the development of vaccines, and the spin-off from that technology is enormous in drug development. And on it goes. And I could give you dozens of examples, and they're in my book. So that's where we start. Now, we are familiar with it, and it's worth giving a second example of it, because most of us voluntarily are wearing, first of all, a tracker. It's called a smartphone.
yes.
It knows where we are. It could be even recording what we're saying. But what it does do, of which we're all aware, is if we, for example, buy a book on Amazon, we'll very soon get little pop-ups that say people that bought that book are usually interested in this book. And what's happening there is the AI system is creating a database of your preferences, your interests, your likes, your purchases, and is using that to compare with its vast database of available things for sale so that it predicts what you might like. So this is of huge commercial value. And it leads to something else which most of us don't know about, and we can come to that later, but I'll mention it now, which is called surveillance capitalism. And there's a book by an emerita professor at MIT called Shoshana Zuboff. And it's regarded as a very serious book because the point she's making is global corporations are using your data and without your permission are selling it off to third parties and making a lot of money out of it. And that raises deep privacy issues. So now you're straight into the ethics. So that's narrow AI.
Okay, so let's stay on narrow AI and extend our road a little bit further down towards broader use. You've just talked about us being unaware of, in a way, of how we're being surveilled.
Yes.
And it was right here in Oxford. I think it may have been you who made the point. I can't remember. In a talk that I heard, where the point was made that what's happening in China using artificial intelligence to surveil people is astonishing, but in many ways, all that information is being collected in the West as well. It's not collated in the same way.
That's correct. And this is perhaps one of the scariest aspects of it. What we're talking about here is facial recognition by closed-circuit television. Well, it starts with